This week's shir has been sponsored anonymously, Lizchus Achenu B'nei Yisrael. Welcome to weekly Parsha Insights. This week's Parshas Vayero, there are many different parts of the Parsha, so I thought I'd do a brief overview of what actually, some of the things that are actually part of the Parsha, and then we'll get into the questions that we want to really deepen our understanding of. Okay? So, the Parsha begins with Avrohom Avinu's tremendous Midas HaChesed as he looks for guests. There's the source sheets on the beam if you want. As he looks for guests, even though he's recovering from Bris Milah. As we know, 3 malachim turn up, right? He gives them a proper meal. Incredible achnosas orchim, even though it was a difficult time for him. They tell him the news, he's going to have a child. And then afterwards, Hashem informs Avrohom Avinu of his plans to destroy Sodom. Just giving an overview of the parasha before we get into the questions. And what does Avrohom Avinu do when Hashem tells him about the impending destruction of Sodom? He davens and davens and davens. He begs Hashem, come on, let's save this wicked town. There must be some righteous people there. And we know how Hashem, in the end, decided to still destroy Sodom. Lot was enabled in his escape. His wife turns into a pillar of salt, famously. And then the parasha continues, at 100 years of age, Mazel Tov, Avrohom Avinu becomes a father. Yitzchok is born. And the final part of the parasha begins, Vayihi achar advarim ha'ele v'elekim nisa'es Avrohom. After these things, Hashem tests Avrohom. As we said last week, there are 10 tests in total that Hashem sent to Avrohom Avinu. This is the only one about which it is introduced as a test. Interesting point. Clearly, Akeidas Yitzchok was the grand finale. The grand finale, the 10th one, the hardest one. And this leads us to two questions I'd like to spend some time on. Firstly, what exactly went on with Akeidas Yitzchok? We know that the test of Akeidas Yitzchok has withstood the test of time in that it basically became an everlasting zchus. We mentioned it on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur still today. Remember the Akeidas Yitzchok. What happened in Akeidas Yitzchok? What was the tremendous test that Avrohom went through? What was the single focus, the challenge that Avrohom Avinu met with Akeidas Yitzchok that created this ability for it to be used forever after as a zchus for Klal Yisrael? That's the first question. And the second question is, which I think in a certain way is actually a major question. Why on earth, when it came to Sodom, did Avrohom Avinu fight and daven and beg Hashem to save the wicked lives, the lives of the wicked people of Sodom? But when it came to his own son, his beloved son, not a word. Hashem tells him, kill your son, off he goes. He goes. Why? What's the difference? So let's take a look at the Gemara in Sanhedrin, page Tesima base, which broadens out a bit more context to the circumstances around Akeidas Yitzchok. And I'm not going to go through the Gemara inside, but it is worthwhile if you can, in your own time, to go through the Gemara inside. It's very interesting. But the Gemara discusses, Vayihi achad dvarim ha'ele is the opening pasuk to this whole Akeidas Yitzchok, the opening pasuk. And what does it mean after these things? So the Gemara says, it means after the Satan had come along to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and complained to Hashem. What was the Satan's complaint? Oh, you know this guy, Avrohom Avinu, you think he's such a great tzaddik. Well, actually, he just made a feast to celebrate his son, Vayigomal, his son weaned. He's made a feast celebrating his son, and he didn't even offer up one single korban for you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You see, he doesn't really care about you. He's not that much of a major guy. That's what the Satan's complaint to HaKadosh Baruch Hu was. And Hashem replied to him, you don't realize how Avrohom Avinu is. If I tell him to sacrifice this son that he loves so much, he will do it without a problem. Miyad, says the Gemara, Halekim says Avrohom, Hashem tests Avrohom, Vayero, and he says to him, Kachla esbincha, take your son for Akeidas Yitzchok. So you see the setup here is, the Satan came along, as it were, to wind up HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to say to him, say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, your Avrohom is not what you think he is. And Hashem says, no, you know what, let's test him. The Gemara goes on, and the Gemara tells us that actually this test of Akeidas Yitzchok is compared, b'moshel, to a king who fights many battles. And he has one gibor, one strong man at his side, his right-hand man, who continuously fights for him and makes him successful in battle. And after many battles, it comes to one final big battle. And the king turns to his strong man and says, please, stand by me for this one too. Because if you don't stand by me for this one and win it for me, then everyone's going to question all the earlier ones as well. Says the Gemara, exactly the same thing. He said, yes, I tested you many times. And you taka withstood them all. But amoid li b'nisoyan zu, please stand by this nisoyan, withstand this nisoyan of Akeidas Yitzchok. Shelo yomer, they shouldn't say, ein mamish barishonim, it disqualified the earlier ones. And the Maharsha has a very interesting choice of language when explaining this mashal of the Gemara and mashal nimshal. And the Maharsha says that when we talk about a milchama, it's not just a milchama, a fight in the mashal, it's a milchama in the nimshal as well. Because the milchama that's happening here is, says the Maharsha, who kitrugoy shal satan, who has satan, who has Yetzer Hara. It is a fight that the Yetzer Hara is putting up against Avrohom Avinu. Who's the gibor that was in the story, the strong man? It's Avrohom Avinu. Shekovash es Yitzroi v'nitzchoi. Avrohom Avinu overcame his Yetzer Hara and won him over. And the Maharsha says, like the Mishnah tells us, Ezo gibor hakovash es Yitzroi. Who's a strong man? Someone who overcomes the Yetzer Hara. Very interesting use of language here of the Maharsha. The Maharsha is talking about this nisayon of Akeidas Yitzchok, and he's describing it in terms of a fight with the Yetzer Hara. We're going to see more on that in a second, but just in brackets, if anyone wondered, was this nisayon really that difficult for Avrohom Avinu? You know, Avrohom Avinu was a great big tzaddik. Was it really that difficult for him? The Gemara continues that, and Rashi brings this on the Chumash, that Hashem had to break it down to him when he gave him the instruction to take his son. He said to him, your son. And Avrohom Avinu says, which one? He says, Yichidcha. Well, I've got two Yichidcha. Each one has their own mother. And eventually HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, he says, yeah, well, I love them both. And then Hashem says Yitzchok, and he pinpoints Yitzchok. And the Gemara says, why did Hashem have to break it down so much? In order for Avrohom Avinu not to lose his mind. Do you realize that Avrohom Avinu, the great big Eved Hashem, the one who's been through 9 nisyonos, had a maimin like no one else, discovered, we said last week, he spent 37 years searching for HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he found him in the end. This is Avrohom Avinu. You give him a test like this one. You tell it to him too quickly, Avram, he's going to go Meshuggah. That's how difficult a challenge this was for Avrohom Avinu. So Hashem broke it to him piecemeal. But the Satan's not finished yet. The Gemara continues. The Satan comes along to Avrohom Avinu and says, quotes Psukim in Eov. Again, the actual wording doesn't really matter. We're just talking about the context here. The Satan says, no, you regret what you're up to here? Do you regret it yet? And Avrohom Avinu says, Ani betumi elech. I'm walking with my integrity. I'm going betaminos. I'm going with what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to me. Leave me alone. The Satan says to him words which I think are such powerful, must have really hurt Avrohom Avinu to hear this. He quotes words in Eov. Satan says to him, Halo yir'oscha chislasecha. Your fear of Hashem is your foolishness. You, Avrohom Avinu, you're the great fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but you're an intelligent man. You're an intelligent man. What are you doing? Hashem's telling you to kill your son. Come on. Your fear of Hashem is your foolishness, says the Satan to Avrohom Avinu. Avram says, keep out. It's okay. Hashem decides who lives and dies. No one innocent dies. Hashem knows what he's doing. I'm going ahead with this. So the Sultan realizes he's lost the argument. He turns it around. He says, I shomati ma'achira paragod. I heard from behind the curtain that actually this whole thing is not even going to work out. You're not even going to shech your son in the end anyway. It's not going to work out. I'm telling you. So what are you bothering for? That's the Sultan's final, real pushback. And Avram says to him, sorry, not interested. So that's the conversation the Gemara records. Back and forth between Avram and the Sultan. But now we're going to go to the Medrash Tanchuma. And again, this is a longer medrash. If you have time, go through it. It's kedai. It's lovely to see the different elements of Avrohom Avinu and his gadlus in the way he took to this greatness, son Akeidas Yitzchok. But this part of the medrash I'm going to quote actually focuses on what Avrohom Avinu said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu after the whole thing had happened. So he'd gone to Akeidas Yitzchok. He'd attempted to shecht Yitzchok. His knife was on Yitzchok's neck, literally about to do it. And Malach says stop. And now Avrohom turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he says to him, Avrohom Avinu says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I had in my heart what to answer you when you instructed me to do Akeidas Yitzchok. You told me yesterday, Avrohom Avinu says, Ki b'Yitzchok yikar l'chol zara. My whole future, all the descendants after me were going to come through Yitzchok. But now you tell me ha'aleu sham lo'ila that I should take him as a carbon. I had what to answer you, said Avrohom Avinu to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, listen to the Lashon HaMedrash. V'chavashti es yitzri v'loi hishavticha. And I conquered my Yetzer Hara and I didn't answer you. Very interesting use of words. Says Avrohom Avinu to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kach, please Hashem, when the children of Yitzchok later in generations, they're going to do Averos, they're going to end up in difficult places. Please remember Akeidas Yitzchok forever after, that what happened over here should be a schus for them. And Hashem said to him, yeah, sure, no problem. On Rosh Hashanah, take a shofar and blow it, and I'll remember Akeidas Yitzchok. But again, what I want to point to is, we spoke it through from the Marshal before, and now it's a Medrash Tanchuma, that the way we're characterizing what's going on, we're pointing to when Avrohom Avinu is turning to Hashem and saying, hey, look at me, I did what you asked. The way he's describing himself, the way he's describing, so to speak, standing b'nesayin, he's describing it as a battle with the Yetzer Hara that he won. And that's very interesting to me. Let's further expand on the nesayin itself and the hardship. What Avrohom Avinu, we already said that Yetzer Hara was up against the Yetzer Hara over here. We understand that on some level. But the Beis HaLevi says that truthfully, this nesayin was a nesayin for Avrohom and it was a nesayin for Yitzchok. Both of them. Yitzchok was being asked to give up his own life, and Avrohom was being asked to give up the life of his son. Says at Beis HaLevi, but Avrohom Avinu's nesayin was far harder than Yitzchok. Because he says, we find many people in the world who are prepared to give up their life for things. And to give up their life for HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. It should never happen to any of us, but we all know of stories on difficult times in Klal Yisrael where people were forced either to die al Kiddush Hashem or to do the wrong thing. People were more than willing in the moment to risk, to give up their life for the sake of Hashem. But says the Beis HaLevi, to live your life for the sake of Hashem is a whole different thing. So we just put it down to a practical mashal, right? So a guy has a big desire for a juicy McDonald's. It's something that really talks to him. He really, really wants to have a good Gesundter burger. And every day he goes past McDonald's and he smells the smell and his mouth waters. Every day he's thinking to himself, oh, if only I could have it. So you compare two scenarios. One scenario where someone comes with a gun and says, either have the McDonald's or I'll kill you, right? I'm not talking halachically now, I'm just talking conceptually. He'll be prepared to give up his life not to eat McDonald's. Right? That's a one-off challenge. Okay, once he's over the line, he'll be in Olam Haba and he'll be all happy ever after. What about the guy who's not threatened by a gun? But every single day he's up against the same thing. And every day he has to not have the McDonald's and continue living his life not having had the McDonald's. For Yitzchok Avinu to give up his life, it was taka a big deal. Don't get me wrong, Yitzchok Avinu asked for him to be tied down, so it couldn't have been that easy, I understand. But Lamaisa, he'll be killed and that'll be it. Off he goes to Olam Haba. He won't know anything about it afterwards. Avrohom Avinu is going to have to live the rest of his life every single day, minus his son. Not just minus his son, but minus his son that he himself killed. That's an nesayin that you can't imagine. That's unfathomable. That's what Beis HaLevi says. And furthermore, Briskerov brings from Reb Chaim Brisker that the words Ki b'Yitzchok yikar l'chol zara, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Avrohom Avinu, your future is going to be through Yitzchok, he meant all the brachas I promised you, the Eretz Yisrael I promised you, the Bris Ben Absorim, the Torah, the Klal Yisrael, the entire future that I painted before you, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All of that is hinged, dependent on Yitzchok. And now HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns to Avrohom Avinu and says, sacrifice him? Do you realize what Avrohom Avinu is putting here at stake? It's not just the fact that he's killing his own son, his only son, his beloved son, his Yitzchok. He waited 100 years till he had him. Not only that, he's giving up the entire potential bracha and everything that was going to come to him through Yitzchok. He's also giving it up. And I'll tell you even more. And this is Haflo Afela. The Pirish Be'er HaTorah was written by a Talmud Chacham called Rav Moshe Moss. He was a Talmud of the Marshal, lived in the 15th century. Brought it here on the page. The Be'er HaTorah, he asks the similar questions to what we began with, but he writes, how could it be that Avrohom Avinu was Zoicha to Hashras Hashchina? Avrohom Avinu was Zoicha to the Malach coming to him and talking to him. We know from Chazal, Ein HaNevuah Sheira Elo Mitoich Simcha. Nevuah can only come to a person when they are happy. So just imagine what's going on over here. When Avrohom Avinu approached Akeidas Yitzchok, he didn't do it half-heartedly. Well, Nebuch. What should I do? That's what Hashem commanded me to shine. I'll kill my son if you want. So you really want Hashem? I'll do along with it. Not at all. Avrohom Avinu went to carry out the command of Hashem to sacrifice his son b'simcha. He did it with joy, with a full heart. It's incredible. That's Avrohom Avinu. That was his challenge. That what we've just described is illustrating a bit what was going on. When Hashem said to Avrohom Avinu to sacrifice his son, what was the challenge here? What was he truly up against? But we've said that this was described as a fight with the Yetzer Hara. So let's try and pause for a moment, get into fights with the Yetzer Hara. Let's try and understand what it means to fight with the Yetzer Hara and come back and match it with Avrohom Avinu. It's very well known, Gemara in Sukkah. Sukkah Nun Beis Amud Aleph. Gemara tells us that there are 7 names given to describe the Yetzer Hara. Ra, bad. Oral, someone who's uncircumcised. Tomei, Soine, an enemy. Michshoil, is a stumbling block. Even is a stone. And the final one is Tzifoni, or Tzipuni, which is a Lashon Tzofen, means hidden. And that last one is very peculiar. I want to go into that a little bit. Firstly, when we talk about names given to Yetzer Hara, we're not talking about, nicknames. A name, says the Aruch LaNer, means it's telling us the way the Yetzer Hara is going to show up. Each of the 7 names, and by the way, Midrashim bring many more names to the Yetzer Hara, means to indicate the Yetzer Hara turns up in many different ways. Says the Aruch LaNer, when we talk about the Yetzer Hara being a tzifoni, a hidden one, what do we mean? How does the Yetzer Hara turn up hidden? Says the Aruch LaNer, Shalifa'amim Adam Choshev She'oisa Mitzvah V'lo Yoda Ki Atzas Yetzer Hara Morav Boy. Sometimes a person's doing a mitzvah and he doesn't realize that even though it's a mitzvah, it's actually upon the advice and the direction he's driven by the Yetzer Hara. Similarly, the Moreh Misodeh also explains that the Yetzer Hara is hiding in the heart of a person. He's hiding there, pushing a person to do a mitzvah, which looks like a good thing, but actually is not a good thing. We've been very used to, we brought up with it, we're very used to the idea of fighting the Yetzer Hara. If fighting the Yetzer Hara would be a black and white situation, if it would be the case, look, buckle up, do mitzvahs, don't do averos, just like that, then it would make it much easier. So you have a guy in the winter now. It gets dark early, we take Shabbos in earlier. Friday night, you're sitting on the couch, reading a good book, it's geschmack, getting into it, and all the lights in the house go out. The candle's already long finished. There's no moon, there's nowhere to get light from, and you've got no Shabbos lamp on either, and you're desperate to carry on the book. So a thought comes into your mind, you know what, let's turn the light on. I don't believe there's anyone who's Elech from Yid who's really going to give that much thought. Don't be stupid, turn the light on. I want to read. Yeah, but come on, it's Shabbos, so you don't turn the light on. Right? There's no battle of the Yetzer Hara. I mean, I don't think so, most of us. It's just not where we're at. That's not where Tzifoni, that's not what the challenge of the Yetzer Hara is. The challenge is the grey area, not when it's black and white. It's when the right and the wrong isn't easily defined by, well, it's a mitzvah, well, it's an avera. It's when the lines are a bit crossed. And I'll tell you a story that I think really illustrates this. Short story Melech Biderman says over about the son-in-law of Reb Neder Yehuda, a man by the name of Rav Yosef Posner. And he received a letter from a kehillah that were having a big fight about a particular gentleman who they wanted to hire as a chazan. Problem is, this chazan was very well known to be an Bal Avera. He was up to no good, and everybody knew that. But still, the majority view in the community was they wanted to hire this guy as a chazan. Obviously, he had a beautiful voice. The minority in the community were very upset about it. They said, how can it be that we can have a chazan who's not a Yirei Shamayim at best, but at worst, he was Bal Avera Barabim? The reality of this dispute was such that had this appointment not gone ahead, would have caused a great machlekes in the community. I can't explain as to why, because I don't know. These are the facts of the story. It would have caused a great machlekes. The other way around wouldn't have, but this way around it would have. So had the appointment not gone ahead. And this was the question they posed to Rav Yosef Posner, telling him all the details of what was at stake. And he writes back, it's better to have a tselem, a church cross, in the Beis HaMedrash than to cause machlekes. Take the chazan. Now to me, and often with stories of machlekes, this is what comes out. People become enraged very quickly when it comes to right and wrong. And you have a situation here where on the outside, it looks like, what do you mean? Of course you don't hire a chazan who's a Bal Avera. Like, what are you even thinking? And yet the Paisik writes and says, no, actually to avoid machlekes is even more important. And this to me is a brilliant example where the Yetzer Hara gets in there and he stirs and he turns up and he churns and he goes, no, mitzvah. What do you mean a chazan? Chazan has to be Yirei Shamayim. Stand up for it. What are you doing? It's wrong. That's not where the lines should be drawn. And there's a reason why the Gemara continues in Sukkah. On Rabbi Yitzchok, we suffer defeat every day with the Yetzer Hara. What, you think the Yetzer Hara is making us do outright Averas every day? Maybe, I don't think so. We talk Lashon Hara? We don't talk Lashon Hara. No. But when it comes to a situation where you think, oh, yeah, but this is Ta'elis. Right, this I have to tell him. And this I've got a halachic reason I'm allowed to tell him. And we justify however we justify it, everyone to their own. It's that justification is where we fall. Right? It's the grey area where the right from the wrong isn't that clear, and we sort of go, and the Yetzer Hara comes along and says, yeah, and off we go. There's a passage in Keheles which talks of the Yetzer Hara, Yetzer Tov Yeled Miskein V'Chocham Mimelech Zokein Nechsil. So the Yetzer Hara is referred to as a Melech Zokein Nechsil, an old Melech, because he's been around for longer. As we know, the Yetzer Tov, when he comes to pass when he's 13, the Yetzer Hara is there from birth. The Alshich on this pasuk is beautiful. He speaks out the identifying feature of a Yetzer Hara versus a Yetzer Tov, and I think this is really, really powerful. How does a Yetzer Hara come to a person? It says the Alshich, Toifes ha'hasmoda v'huma o masariv tomid ad yifate v'yuchal. The Yetzer Hara comes to a guy, and he is persistent, and he wants it now. He's relentless, comes very energized. Those are the types of thought storm we get. Great idea, very important, must react now, must shout, must scream, must fight, whatever it is that the Yetzer Hara is telling you to do. That's the voice of the Yetzer Hara. The voice of the Chacham, the voice of the Yetzer Tov, Piv yiftach b'chochma pam achas. Umir shechavetz chaim yishma. The Chacham comes along, the Yetzer Hara comes along very softly, very calmly, inserts a word of wisdom. The guy who's open to it will hear it, will be able to act upon it. But that's all it is. Yetzer Tov talks wisdom, comes from a peaceful place, neutral place, one worthwhile considering. Yetzer Hara comes at us hard, fast, now, urgent. I think the right word is actually impulsive. Let's come back to Avrohom Avinu. Avrohom Avinu was told explicitly by Akeidas Baruch Hu to sacrifice his son. The Yetzer Hara comes along. The Yetzer Hara doesn't come along to Avrohom Avinu and say to him, listening to Hashem. Don't listen to Hashem. What are you doing? That's ridiculous. We don't listen to Hashem. Of course Avrohom Avinu is going to listen to Hashem. There's not even a conversation to be had there. No. The Yetzer Hara comes along and says, Avrohom Avinu, doesn't make sense. What are you doing? It doesn't make sense. Avrohom Avinu was a person, a seichel person, intelligent man. Hashem's promised you so much and he's going to ask you to give it all up now. It doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to Avrohom Avinu either. Avrohom Avinu openly admitted that at the end when he said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chavashti es Yitzri, I overcame my Yetzer Hara. I could have answered you, he says to Hashem. I could have argued with you, but I didn't. It didn't make sense to me. But he had heard explicit command from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He knew jolly well what Hashem wanted from him, and so he went with it. How? How was Avrohom Avinu able to navigate around this Yetzer Hara, this onslaught of the Yetzer Hara telling him, come on, this is ridiculous? There's a Ramban. I am so pleased I found this Ramban. The Ramban says, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu give Avrohom Avinu 3 days travel before in the lead up to Akeidas Yitzchok? Why didn't Hashem say to Avrohom Avinu, do Akeidas Yitzchok, do it now and do it over there? Why did he give him 3 days to travel? Says the Ramban, because if he would have done it immediately, Avrohom Avinu would have carried out Akeidas Yitzchok in great confusion, with great behala. After 3 days of travel, Avrohom Avinu had plenty time to consider everything, to be calm, to come to a place, a neutral place, one that he's able to see right from wrong and stand behind his choice to listen to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'chol liboy v'nafshi, to be there wholeheartedly, b'simcha, to be able to meet HaKadosh Baruch Hu's command. In other words, where the Yetzer Hara gets us best is when he comes at us, like the Al-Sheikh says. The Yetzer Hara comes at us with a thought storm. The Yetzer Hara comes at us hard and fast and urgent and impulsive. And in that moment of milchama, in that moment of fight, it's very het up. It's very difficult to see sense. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to do was give Avrohom Avinu Yeshuv Das. 3 days. Yeah, the Yetzer Hara is going to come, but you've got plenty of time. You don't need to react now. There's nothing to act upon now. Give yourself time. With time, with reflection, many times we find, you're in a situation you need to do, you need to act, you need to say. Very often you don't need to. You think you need to in the moment, but actually give yourself time. Just calm down. Just take some time out for yourself. Let the wisdom come in quietly. Listen out for it. And that's the way around the Yetzer Hara. Rabbi, so we asked 2 questions. We asked, what was the challenge that was Akeidas Yitzchok, that caused for it to be a schus, a timeless schus forever after? From my understanding, from what we've said today, this was the quintessential battle with the Yetzer Hara that Avrohom Avinu was up against. The circumstances was he was being asked to sacrifice his son, and we said there's a lot of challenge in that, of course. But essentially what was going on was Avrohom Avinu was fighting the Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara was coming at him hard. And Avrohom Avinu withstood the Yetzer Hara because he was able to see things calmly from a perspective of right from wrong, which has to come from contemplation, from being able to give oneself space to ponder right from wrong. Avrohom Avinu had the 3 days to do so, and he fought his Yetzer Hara and he won him. Because the circumstances were so difficult, that's why that particular battle with the Yetzer Hara is one that stands us in good stead as chusum forever after. But essentially, it was a battle of the Yetzer Hara. But then the question we asked was, why was it different by Sodom? Why was it that Sodom Avrohom Avinu davened, and here he didn't? Well, in my opinion, what we've been saying feeds right into this. Not every time what is right to do in one circumstance is right to do in another circumstance. What is right then is not right now. There's no rules necessarily about right from wrong always. Avrohom Avinu understood in the time when he was told about Sodom. He understood. He had an understanding. What was the right thing to do now? Daven to save Sodom. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling it to me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling it to me so that I should defend, so that I should daven. But when HaKadosh Baruch Hu came later within the sign of Akeidas Yitzchok, that scenario came across to Avrohom Avinu differently. In that scenario, Avrohom Avinu contemplated, understood. What was Hashem asking of me? Hashem is asking of me to withstand the Nisayon, to go ahead and sacrifice my own son. As much as it's counterintuitive, it seems to me counterproductive. It doesn't make any sense. It goes against everything I stand for, Avrohom Avinu. He's been preaching to everybody now, believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, don't kill. Don't live as was common then in pagan times to kill right, left, center. That's what Avrohom Avinu has been preaching his whole life. And Hashem comes and tells him this instruction which flies in the face of that. But that Haguf Avrohom Avinu understood what was required of him in that moment. In other words, I think the answer to the question is, the Yetzer Hara likes to confuse things. But actually, if you take the time to appreciate what really is going on here, what's really being asked of me, then it becomes clear to a person the right from wrong. And in every circumstance, that will look different. By Sodom, it looked daven for Sodom's safety, and by his own son he looked carry out the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu without question. Shkoyach.